You've probably found yourself in that confusing space where you keep watching someone's behavior, trying to decide whether the connection you feel is actually real. They rarely initiate conversations. Just when things begin feeling comfortable, they suddenly create distance. And before long, you're not only questioning them, you're questioning your own judgment. You wonder whether you're reading too much into every little interaction, or whether there is genuinely something happening beneath the surface. Then, sometimes, something tiny changes. A small gesture, a different tone, a brief moment of attention that seems insignificant until you realize your entire nervous system noticed it. This is where avoidant attachment becomes especially difficult to understand. People who struggle most with emotional closeness can sometimes reveal the most when they genuinely begin developing feelings. The difference is that their signals usually aren't dramatic. They rarely arrive as obvious declarations or sweeping romantic gestures. Instead, their feelings appear through small behaviors that can easily be overlooked. And if you don't understand what those behaviors mean, you may completely miss what is happening. Before we get into the signs, there is something important you need to understand. Avoidant attachment shouldn't automatically be interpreted as cruelty, manipulation, or intentional emotional games. For many people, emotional distance developed as a protective strategy much earlier in life. When someone learns that depending on others leads to disappointment, that vulnerability can result in pain, or that emotional closeness isn't safe, their nervous system adapts. Independence becomes protection. Distance becomes security. Needing another person starts feeling dangerous. That creates a complicated contradiction. An avoidant person may genuinely want connection, while simultaneously becoming frightened when that connection starts becoming emotionally significant. They can desire intimacy and then feel the urge to escape the moment intimacy becomes real. So when someone with avoidant tendencies begins developing feelings, two forces can start competing inside them. One part moves toward connection, while another immediately searches for safety through distance. You can often see that internal conflict through their behavior. The first sign is that they begin remembering the little things you've told them. Not the obvious information everyone remembers. I'm talking about those random comments you made weeks ago without expecting anyone to remember them. Maybe you mentioned a drink you dislike. Maybe you casually talked about a childhood show. Perhaps you told them about something that makes you uncomfortable, a small preference, or a passing thought you assumed disappeared from the conversation. Then, weeks later, they bring it up. That matters. People with avoidant tendencies can be highly observant. When someone has grown up needing to read situations carefully, they may become very sensitive to small changes in other people. They notice more than they necessarily reveal. When their attention becomes focused on you, those observations can become surprisingly detailed. They remember what you said. They remember what matters to you. They store information without announcing that they've been paying attention. And eventually, pieces of that information begin appearing naturally in conversations. That can be significant because allowing you to realize they've been paying attention is itself a form of vulnerability. Being noticed means being known. Being known creates emotional exposure, and emotional exposure can feel risky to someone whose instinct is to protect their independence. So don't judge this sign by one isolated incident. Look for repetition. If personal details you've shared continue resurfacing in their conversations, decisions, or behavior, you're seeing a pattern of attention. And consistent attention usually tells you far more than one dramatic moment ever could. The second sign is that they begin finding reasons to contact you when there isn't really a reason. This is especially meaningful when the person normally communicates only when something needs to be discussed. Avoidant people may prefer practical, purposeful communication. They answer questions, handle necessary conversations, and respond when there is an obvious reason to interact. But emotional outreach is different. Starting a conversation simply because they wanted contact requires initiative. Initiative reveals interest. Revealing interest can make someone with avoidant tendencies feel exposed. So instead of saying, "I wanted to talk to you," they may approach indirectly. They send you a funny post. They forward something they think you'll like. They ask a completely unnecessary question. They mention something they saw that reminded them of you. On the surface, none of these behaviors looks romantic. That's precisely why they can be easy to dismiss. But sometimes the real message isn't contained in the excuse. It's contained in the fact that they wanted an excuse at all. They were thinking about you and wanted some form of connection, but direct emotional expression may have felt too vulnerable. Again, frequency matters. One random message doesn't prove anything, but when you notice them repeatedly creating small opportunities to enter your world, pay attention to the pattern rather than the individual excuse. The third sign is that they begin voluntarily revealing pieces of their inner world. This might happen slowly. Maybe they mention something difficult from childhood. Perhaps they tell you about an experience that shaped them. They might casually reveal an insecurity, a fear, a personal struggle, or something they normally keep private. They may even say it as though it means nothing. But don't assume that because they delivered it casually, the information itself is insignificant. Avoidant people can have extremely rich emotional and internal lives while remaining highly private about them. They may think deeply, feel intensely, and still struggle to communicate those experiences to another person. Over time, they learn how to keep conversations safe by remaining on the surface. They can be funny, intelligent, engaging, and easy to talk to, while still keeping an invisible wall between themselves and everyone else. So when that wall lowers, even slightly, notice it. They're allowing you to see something that isn't available to everyone, and your response matters. If they share something vulnerable and you immediately interrogate them, demand more details, or turn the moment into an intense emotional conversation, they may feel exposed and retreat. A better response is calm acknowledgement. Let the moment breathe. Receive what they've offered without making them regret offering it. You don't need to force the door open just because they cracked it. The fact that they opened it at all may be the important part. The fourth sign is subtler. They begin reacting differently when someone else shows interest in you. Avoidant people often resist labels, ownership, and anything that feels like emotional obligation. They may hesitate to define relationships because definition can feel connected to expectations, responsibility, or loss of freedom. But developing feelings can create reactions they weren't expecting. You might notice them becoming quieter when someone flirts with you. They may make an oddly casual comment about another person in your life. They could suddenly become more attentive after seeing someone else give you attention. They may not openly admit jealousy. Instead, the feeling can leak through their behavior. This doesn't automatically mean possessiveness or unhealthy jealousy. It can simply indicate that attachment is developing, and they're struggling to understand what those feelings mean. Their emotions may be moving faster than their ability to communicate them, so watch for changes in their energy when other people enter the picture. The fifth sign is perhaps the most confusing of all. They become distant immediately after a particularly meaningful moment with you. You have an amazing conversation. You connect deeply. Everything feels natural and warm. Then suddenly they pull away. Their replies become slower. Their tone changes. They seem less available. You start wondering what happened. Did you say something wrong? Did they lose interest? Did you misunderstand the entire connection? Not necessarily. For someone with avoidant attachment, emotional closeness itself can activate a protective response. A beautiful moment doesn't necessarily feel safe simply because it was beautiful. The more emotionally meaningful the interaction becomes, the more exposed they may feel afterward. And when their nervous system interprets closeness as danger, distance becomes the automatic solution. This is why you can sometimes see a strange pattern: connection, warmth, intimacy, and then withdrawal. That withdrawal shouldn't automatically be interpreted as proof that they don't care. It can be their way of regulating after feeling emotionally exposed. But remember something important. Understanding the reason behind someone's withdrawal doesn't mean you have to tolerate unlimited inconsistency. Don't chase them repeatedly. Don't panic and flood them with messages. Give reasonable space while remaining grounded in your own life. And then watch what happens next. Do they eventually return with more openness? Does the connection slowly become deeper? Do the moments of closeness become more frequent? That brings us to the sixth sign, which may be one of the most meaningful. They begin making small, consistent adjustments to include you in their life. Avoidant people often protect their independence very strongly. Their routines, time, personal space, and freedom can feel like essential parts of their emotional security. So when they voluntarily make room for you, Even in small ways, notice it. They might rearrange their schedule to see you, include you in something they normally do alone, introduce you to someone important in their life, remember an upcoming event because they know it matters to you, or gradually make you part of routines that once existed completely separately from you. These actions may seem ordinary, but sometimes ordinary behavior carries extraordinary meaning. They may not say, "You're becoming important to me." Instead, they're showing it through repeated choices. And this is why trying to understand an avoidant person purely through words can leave you confused. Their developing attachment may be communicated through behavior long before they have the courage or emotional vocabulary to explain it. Still, there is one crucial distinction you must never lose sight of. Recognizing that someone may be developing feelings doesn't automatically mean they're capable of giving you the relationship you need. You can understand their fear and still acknowledge your own needs. You can recognize their progress and still decide that the pace is too painful for you. You can believe their feelings are genuine, while also realizing that genuine feelings alone don't guarantee emotional availability. That distinction is where self-respect begins. So don't ask only, "Do they care about me?" Ask the deeper question, "Can this person, as they are right now, build the kind of relationship I actually need?" Those are two completely different questions, and the answer to the second one matters just as much as the first. Because one sign can be explained away, two signs can still be coincidence. But when several of these behaviors appear consistently across weeks or months, you're no longer looking at isolated moments. You're looking at a pattern. And patterns tell you much more than individual incidents ever can. If you've been watching someone closely and wondering whether the connection you feel is actually developing into something deeper, remember this. One isolated behavior rarely tells the whole story. What matters is repetition. A single thoughtful message could mean nothing. One remembered detail could simply be a good memory. But when several behaviors keep appearing together over time, the picture becomes much clearer. This is especially important when dealing with someone who has avoidant tendencies, because their feelings may not appear in the obvious ways you expect. You might spend weeks wondering whether you're imagining everything. You may replay conversations, analyze their responses, and question whether a warm moment actually meant something. That constant uncertainty can slowly make you distrust your own perception. So instead of obsessing over individual moments, step back and look at the overall direction. Is this person gradually moving closer? Or are you constantly finding new explanations for why they remain exactly where they have always been? That distinction can tell you more than any single sign. An avoidant person who is genuinely developing emotionally will usually show some form of movement, even if that movement is slow and uneven. Their walls may come down a little at a time. Their conversations may become more personal. Their willingness to include you may increase. Their moments of emotional openness may happen more frequently. Even their withdrawals may begin becoming shorter or less severe. It won't necessarily look like a straight line. There can still be closeness followed by distance, openness followed by hesitation, a beautiful interaction followed by a period of needing space. But if you zoom out far enough, you should be able to see some kind of direction. They're gradually coming toward you. That is very different from someone who gives you occasional emotional moments while keeping the relationship permanently stuck in the same place. And this is where you have to become honest with yourself. Our minds are extremely good at protecting the stories we want to believe. If you desperately want something to work, you may remember the beautiful conversation and forget the weeks of emotional distance that followed it. You may give one meaningful gesture more importance than months of inconsistency. You may tell yourself, "They're just scared." Maybe they are, but fear explains behavior. It doesn't automatically make the behavior sustainable. Understanding someone's emotional history can help you respond with compassion, but it shouldn't require you to ignore what their behavior is doing to you. You can understand why someone struggles with intimacy and still recognize that their lack of availability hurts. You can care deeply about someone and still need more communication. You can recognize genuine feelings and still decide that feelings without action aren't enough for the relationship you want. That balance is incredibly important. If you find yourself constantly waiting, interpreting, analyzing, and adjusting yourself around another person's emotional limitations. Ask yourself whether you're building a relationship or simply managing their discomfort. Those are not the same thing. A healthy connection needs room for both people. The avoidant person deserves space to move at a pace they can emotionally handle. But you deserve clarity, consistency, respect, and reciprocity too. Neither person's needs should completely disappear. Now let's talk about another question that often comes up. Should you actually tell them what you're noticing? Should you ask where this is going? Should you admit that you have feelings? There isn't one universal answer, but timing matters enormously. If you bring up an intense relationship conversation before there is any foundation, someone with avoidant tendencies may immediately feel pressured. If you wait forever, however, you may spend months investing emotionally without knowing whether the other person is actually capable of meeting you halfway. The goal isn't to force a confession. The goal is to create enough emotional safety for an honest conversation. Instead of approaching them with something like, "I need to know exactly what this relationship is," you can make the conversation more open. You might communicate that you've genuinely enjoyed what has been developing and simply want to understand how they see it. That approach doesn't demand an immediate answer. It gives them room to think and respond honestly, and their response can tell you a great deal. Don't listen only to the words. Watch what happens around the conversation. Do they stay engaged? Do they acknowledge their uncertainty honestly? Do they make an effort to understand your perspective? Or do they immediately shut down, avoid the subject, or disappear? Their behavior after the conversation matters just as much as what they say during it. Sometimes an avoidant person can express openness in a conversation and then become distant afterward because the discussion itself made the emotional situation feel more real. If that happens, don't immediately assume the entire conversation was meaningless. Give the situation some breathing room and observe what happens next. Do they return? Do they reconnect? Do they eventually become more comfortable? That pattern can reveal much more than trying to force an immediate emotional conclusion. There is also something else worth understanding about the way avoidant people may express affection. Many people grow up with a very specific picture of what love is supposed to look like. Love is supposed to be verbal. Someone tells you constantly how much they care. They openly express their feelings. They want to spend every possible moment together. They pursue you without hesitation. They make their intentions obvious. But not everyone communicates affection that way. Someone with avoidant tendencies may communicate attachment more through actions than declarations. They remember something you mentioned months ago. They make time for you when they normally protect their schedule. They invite you into parts of their life that they usually keep private. They stay during moments when their instinct tells them to create distance. They begin allowing you to see more of who they really are. To someone expecting traditional romantic signals, those behaviors may appear insignificant. But to an emotionally guarded person, they can represent enormous internal movement. Still, there is an important qualification here. You shouldn't force yourself to accept a communication style that consistently leaves your emotional needs unmet, simply because you understand why the other person communicates differently. Maybe you need words. Maybe reassurance matters deeply to you. Maybe you need emotional conversations, consistent contact, and clear expressions of affection. Those needs are valid. There is nothing unreasonable about wanting a relationship where you feel secure and understood. So the question isn't whether an avoidant person's way of showing affection is good enough in some universal sense. The real question is whether their way of relating can coexist with what you genuinely need. Compatibility matters. Love matters. But so does emotional capacity. Now let's return to the 6 behaviors we discussed, because they become much more meaningful when you see them together. Remembering your small details. Finding unnecessary reasons to contact you. Voluntarily revealing pieces of their inner world. Reacting differently when someone else shows interest in you. Pulling back after moments of genuine emotional closeness. And making small, repeated accommodations to include you in their life. None of these behaviors should be treated as a guaranteed formula. They're clues. And clues become useful when they form a consistent pattern. If several of these behaviors have been appearing repeatedly over a long period of time, it's reasonable to recognize that something is happening emotionally. But don't stop there. Ask yourself what direction that emotional movement is taking. Is the relationship slowly becoming more mutual? Are they taking greater emotional risks? Are they becoming more consistent? Are you seeing actual progress? Or are you constantly receiving just enough connection to keep hoping while nothing fundamentally changes? That second situation can be incredibly difficult because occasional warmth can make prolonged distance feel easier to tolerate. You remember the good moments. You think about what the relationship could become. You interpret every small improvement as evidence that everything is finally changing. And suddenly, you're no longer responding to the relationship as it exists. You're responding to the relationship as you hope it will eventually become. That is where you need to pause. Look at reality, not potential, not fantasy, not the person you believe they could become. Look at how they actually show up. If necessary, write things down. Not obsessively, not as a way to monitor another person. Simply give yourself an honest record of what has been happening. How often do they initiate? How often do they disappear? Do conversations become deeper? Do they make more room for you? Do they follow through? Are you always the one adjusting? Over time, the pattern becomes much easier to see, and that pattern gives you something incredibly valuable: clarity. There is also another side of this story that deserves compassion. It's easy to look at an avoidant person from the outside and conclude that they simply don't care. If someone keeps creating distance, it can feel like they're intentionally withholding affection. But internally, their experience may be much more complicated. They may genuinely want closeness. They may genuinely care. They may even recognize that they're pulling away and not fully understand why they're doing it. One part of them may be thinking, "I want this person in my life." Another part may immediately respond, "This is becoming too close. Get some distance." That internal conflict can be exhausting. Imagine wanting connection while simultaneously feeling threatened by the vulnerability required to maintain it, wanting to reach out, then stopping yourself, feeling deeply but struggling to explain what you're feeling, getting close, becoming uncomfortable, and then creating distance even though you didn't necessarily want the distance in the first place. For some avoidant people, this pattern has existed for so long that they don't even recognize it as an attachment response. They may simply believe they're someone who needs a lot of independence. They may wonder why relationships become uncomfortable when they become serious. They may criticize themselves for repeatedly pulling away from people they genuinely like. They may not have the language to explain what is happening inside them. Understanding that doesn't erase the impact on you, but it does give you a more complete picture. You're not necessarily dealing with someone deliberately trying to make you suffer. You may be dealing with someone whose desire for connection is constantly colliding with an old protective system. And when you see those small behaviors, the remembered details, the unexpected messages, the vulnerability, the subtle reactions to competition, the post-connection retreat, and the gradual accommodations, you may be watching that protective system slowly loosen. That's meaningful, but it still needs to be accompanied by your own boundaries, because compassion without boundaries can eventually turn into self-neglect. You don't have to become responsible for someone else's healing. You don't have to prove that you're safe enough by accepting endless uncertainty. You don't have to spend your life waiting for someone to become emotionally available. Your role is not to rescue them from their attachment patterns. Your role is to understand what you're seeing, decide what works for you, and protect your own emotional well-being. That is where the real balance begins. You can give someone space without chasing them. You can remain warm without becoming emotionally dependent on every response. You can appreciate their progress without pretending that small progress is the same thing as a complete relationship. You can care about them while continuing to live your own life. Keep your friendships, keep your interests, keep your routines, keep becoming the person you want to be. Don't make another person's emotional availability the center of your existence. And most importantly, know your limit. There is a point where patience becomes waiting. There is a point where understanding becomes rationalizing. There is a point where giving someone space becomes abandoning yourself. You need to know where that point is for you, because the goal isn't simply to discover whether an avoidant person is falling. The bigger goal is to determine whether the two of you can eventually meet somewhere in the middle. A relationship cannot survive indefinitely on potential. It needs mutual effort. It needs communication. It needs room for both people's needs, and it needs movement. So if you're seeing these signs, don't panic over every withdrawal, and don't celebrate every tiny gesture as proof that everything is perfect. Step back, observe, look at the pattern, look at the trajectory, and most importantly, look at yourself too. Ask whether this connection is helping you feel more grounded over time, or whether it's slowly teaching you to live in constant uncertainty. Because genuine feelings can exist alongside genuine incompatibility. Someone can care about you deeply and still not be ready to give you what you need. Both truths can exist at the same time. And accepting that possibility isn't pessimism, it's emotional maturity. At the end of the day, the real question isn't simply whether an avoidant person has feelings for you. The deeper question is whether those feelings are turning into consistent action, emotional growth, and a relationship where both of you can feel secure. Remember the signs. They remember the little things, find reasons to reach out, reveal more of themselves, react when others show interest in you, sometimes retreat after deep connection, and gradually make more room for you in their life. If these behaviors appear consistently, something may genuinely be developing. But don't lose yourself trying to decode someone else. Give them room without chasing. Be understanding without abandoning your boundaries. Appreciate their progress without accepting endless uncertainty, and keep watching the direction of the relationship. If they're slowly moving toward you, that's meaningful. If you're always waiting for movement that never comes, that's meaningful too. You deserve a connection where feelings don't remain hidden forever, but eventually become clarity, effort, and mutual choice. So trust what you observe, stay honest about what you need, and never make yourself smaller just to keep someone comfortable. The right connection won't require you to disappear inside someone else's fears. Sometimes love grows slowly, but it should still grow. And if this message helped you understand someone, or yourself, a little better, remember one thing. Understanding their behavior matters, but understanding your own worth matters even more.